Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Today is day 25. The topic for today is addressing common problems in construction disputes. Now, it's already 25 days we have been doing L2 construction series, and it's drawing nearer to the end of the third phase of MCO. Hopefully, more businesses will be able to operate after the end of the third phase of MCO. Now, today we have Swee Im with us. Now, we do not need to, I don't think I need to, introduce Swee Im because she is a very well-known figure in the legal construction world and, of course, in the Malaysian construction industry. She was a lawyer and founded a founder of Swee Im, and now Swee Im Siva and Partners. And she is a full-time arbitrator, mediator, and adjudicator. As of this time when I'm speaking, we have already reached about 300 audience today with us. And this is the second time Swee Im is joining L2 Construction Platform to share her views and her legal knowledge about construction law with all of us today. And without further ado, I'm going to pass the mic now to Swee Im. Swee Im, over to you.
Thank you very much to Loon and to Hong Kit. First of all, congratulations for L2 and all of you who have been so resilient and actually tuning in pretty much every day for 25 days. Thank you very much also for having me back. And there's one more thank you I have to make, which is basically on behalf of the Lighthouse Club Kuala Lumpur, which I've been involved in since the inception, and the donations and the caring and sharing that we are doing throughout the industry. So all these are fantastic things to do. I understand that you may be thinking, why am I talking about addressing common problems in construction disputes when on the 7th of April, when I spoke to you, I spoke about settlements, I spoke about mediated arrangements, and coming to a resolution of claims without going to going legal on it, shall we say. But the issue here basically is that, claims, the higher the chance of a claim is based on how well your claim is prepared. So this is why, for example, when Surveyor Amran of JKR talked about the fact that JKR will consider maybe paying 50% of claims even if there is no contractual provision. Well, it's going to be 50% of valid claims. So if you put in ringgit 1 million claim, but you only have claims that are valid of, let's say, 600,000 ringgit, then all of a sudden it's 50% of 600, not 50% of 1 million. So this is why I start talking about addressing common problems in construction disputes, because that's all applicable. Slide, please. The claims are common. We all know about it. Your EOT, lost expenses, your VOs, valuations, undervaluation, non-valuation, wrong rates, all that kind of thing. And then, as usual, you're met with back charges. You're back with you are faced with LAD deductions. So all these are things that we know, and all the principles that I just wanted to run through again today are as applicable to claims as they are to counterclaims as they are to defenses. Because you may recall that previously I was saying that at the end of the day, every one of you here, for every claim that you make, you're probably actually facing 20 claims from people below you. So remember I was talking about change the light bulb, pat the dog, change the light bulb, pat the dog. You are always have to manage it. So every time you look at something, it is going to be a claim and a defense. Slide, please. So here are some common issues that I wanted to just cover. And what I've done is that I've basically looked back at over my 30 plus years. I've looked back at my own mistakes. I look now from the eyes from an arbitrator and adjudicator, where I'm actually less involved in the emotions of each of the parties, and I can be a little bit more clear-cut about things. I'm not in the game to make sure one party wins. I'm in the game to actually make sure that the right thing is done. Slide, please. So I decided to look at things, looking at it, starting backwards, working backwards. As an arbitrator and adjudicator, when I'm presented with a claim, what do I see? I see a maze. I don't know anything about your project. I don't know about the consultants. I don't know about the personalities. I don't know about, Mr. Silva, Mr. Rahman, or Mr. Lee. I don't know when you guys say that this so and so is so unreasonable. I have no knowledge of that. I have no knowledge of the difficulties or the good things or the bad things. So it's a maze, it's a complete maze. Slide, please. So in any claim, you got to show the assessor, be it the adjudicator, be it the SO, be it the mediator, be it whoever, you've got to actually show the way. You've got to show me the way how to get through your entire claim. And you can't just give me a big basket of stuff, put all your things in there and say, nah, here you go, pay me. That doesn't work, but it happens. It happens all the time. Slide, please. So you really do need to have a roadmap. What is the roadmap of the case? What are the issues to be decided? And those issues you've got to consider from a point of view of liability and also from a view of quantum. When you talk about issues, right, you need to break it down. So often, I actually see cases whereby I tell the lawyers, please, you have to actually list down a set of issues so that we can see if by the decision on those particular issues, we can see where the case is going and which claims can be allowed, which claims cannot be allowed, how much for each of those. But very often parties don't even agree on this list of issues, and you get this big lump and says, I want to claim, I disagree, that's it. So that, again, doesn't really work at all. Slide, please. Talking about liability, I think that this has been dealt with by a lot of lawyers, consultants, there are webinars, there are articles. So I'm not going to do this in any degree of detail, but we all know that you have to look at the substantive right, what's your entitlement, we have to look at procedural requirements, notifications, you've got to look at the contract, what that allows, you've got to look at the law. So let's skip that and let's move on. Slide, please. Quantum. I know that you've actually had some webinars and a lot of articles also about quantum, but the one thing that I just wanted to point out to you is that as much as we have to look at the liability for each and every single item of your claim, please also remember that we've also got to look for the quantum of each and every item of the claim. And that the quantum issues actually are often very, very different, because if it's a BQ item or a BQ matter, then the pricing and the quantum that you're claiming there and how you prove it is very different from that of a VO or loss and expenses. So as I said before, you want to actually, as an example for VOs, you want to be looking at each and every single variation order and every component of it, and not just the VOs. Slide, please. One of the things that we have been using to great effect is actually Scotch schedules. Now, what you see on the slide here is actually should be one long bar, and the second item should be to the right and then to the right again. So it's one long bar, but I couldn't put it onto a slide, so that's why it's broken up. And this is just an example from a case actually that was done. And in this particular situation, we were acting for the respondent. This was one of my last few big cases that we dealt with. And Loon was acting for the claimant actually. And we actually used this Scotch schedule because it allowed us to list down every single item, make sure we don't miss it, and we actually were able to deal with it item by item in terms of liability, quantum, evidence, the whole lot. So this is something that, think about. After all, you contractors, you're all kings of Excel sheets, right? Next slide, please. Now, causation. Please do remember that causation is actually a very, very, very important link point that a lot of people don't necessarily talk about enough. People say that there's MCO on, I want to make a claim. Yeah, I've lost money, I want to make a claim. But Where is the causative link? From a liability point of view, as you can see on the slide, how does an event, such as an MCO, such as an additional design change, how does that result in an entitlement for, let's say, time? In this case, how does the event result in a delay to the date for completion? Yes, I know you had a delay, but the entitlement for time under the extension of time clause is a delay to the date for completion. So this is causation. This is something that you really have to link up and actually be very, very aware of it. Quantum, same thing. How does the claim arise from the entitlement event? Additional site expenditure, you say, oh yeah, you know, I'm spending 100,000 ringgit per day. Sure, I understand that you do. But how does that directly relate to the EOT event? How does it relate not to, for example, an event for which the contractor is liable or for which something that is not claimable? So one of the most common issues that we find is that the event occurs, a claim is made, but the causal link is not really set out. So takeaway from this particular slide is that cause and effect is a key ingredient. Slide, please. Evidence. My goodness. This is probably the crux of a lot of things, and this is where probably a lot of people lose out. Evidence. Because for everything that we are talking about, the event, you have to evidence it, you have to prove it. The causation, the cause and effect, you've got to be able to prove it. The impact and the quantum, every single one of these elements, you have to prove it. How do you prove it? You have to prove it using evidence. Like I said, I wasn't there as an arbitrator. I wasn't there living your everyday nightmare of your project. So the only way I can deal with this is by evidence. If the evidence is not in front of me, I can't look at it. Now, evidence, obviously, the best form is documents, but that's not the only way to do things. Obviously, that there are certain things such as oral evidence is still important. But most people are not paying much attention to this, and they look at the claim, they look at the event, they look at the claim and say, you know, look, I've got a good story. So as an example, I've got a little flow chart here on this slide, which talks about making a claim. And let's say in this case, we've been talking a lot about EOT. You've got the event. You've got to prove that. Okay, you say it's the MCO. You have to consider whether it is within the EOT clause. If you do, again, you've got to prove it because you've got to show me your contractual provision. Then you say it causes an impact on the date for completion. You've got to show me that causation. I know that there have been webinars about programming and how to show critical delay and all that. All those are relevant. And you've got to show the impact on completion. You know, the fact that a site is closed down, sure, I think that that probably is a bit easier to show. But when you have got a big site and you've got an event of delay in one corner of it, how does it necessarily impact the entire date for completion? Maybe it doesn't. Loss in expenses. First of all, was it based on EOT that's already been granted? Is it allowed within the loss expense clause? As an example, we talked a lot about force majeure, giving you time but not money. Are the grounds, your cost that you're claiming, your 100,000 a day, is it directly related to those grounds of EOT? And then you've got to think about proving direct costs and overheads separately. Okay, so slide please. What are the common issues? I'm not telling you anything new that you don't know about, but what I am doing is just trying to actually just put into perspective and bring into focus some of the issues that will surface and become critical when you're making claims. Your site diary. Most people actually don't even have site diaries, especially the smaller subcontractors. So if you're, let's say, a larger subcontractor or you're a main contractor, keep a site diary. Even if it is not, and send it to the employer, send it to the consultants. Even if they don't acknowledge receipt of it, you have got it and you've sent it. It is what lawyers love to call contemporaneous evidence. But the guys who do have site diaries, from my observation and experience, very often there's not enough details in the site diary. It doesn't tell you things are, what's happening where on the site. Like I said, you've got a big site and you've got a design change in one corner. Where is it? Yeah, what is the grid line? You talk about, oh, there was rain, inclement weather. Well, how much rain? What hours? What did it impact? Because you and I know, if the covering is on, rain, so what? But if you're, let's say, you're doing concreting of the foundation, yes, of course, it is an impact. Manpower, machinery, where's the distribution on site? You can tell me you've got 500 carpenters and 300 bar benders, but where are they? You know, relative to that particular event of delay that you are complaining about. I can tell you, I worked on one of the early arbitrations I worked on. There were 13 subcontracts between the same parties on this big site. And all those 13 subcontracts, there was only one site diary and one sheet of site diary. How in the world are you going to be able to actually capture everything? You can't, right? And the reason why I talk about site diary, because events on site at the end of the day are the foundation of your claims. That's why you're claiming, because something has happened. The other one is progress reports. Progress reports, again, are something that's a tool that you can use as both sides. Yeah? I'm not talking about just being a contractor, be it a contractor, consultant, subcontractor, employer. The progress reports are, again, a record on a contemporaneous, normally 2 weeks by 2 weeks or month by month, what do you call that? Event, a historical event, okay, of what are the events that could result in the claim. It's got your photos, it should identify the location, the date, and also, please guys, it ought to have an updated program with the reasons for delay. Slide, please. Site meeting minutes. You need to have an accurate description for your site meeting minutes. You need to have a record of the inaccuracies. I can tell you that on one particular arbitration, and we were acting for the employer actually and resisting a claim from the contractor. So the contractor, of course, made the usual claims for delays, you know, due to non-payment, due to VOs, due to this, that, and everything. I started the cross-examination of the contractor by going to the site meeting minutes. And you know, very often it has item 2, what is the reason for the delay? And usually it'll be something like tower crane broke down, still not repaired, not enough people, not enough machinery. So I took him through, first of all, that item, and then the next meeting minutes, item 1, usually what happens? Confirm that the previous minutes are accurate. I took them through all the meeting minutes of that, and every single one of them shows a confirmation that the previous minutes of the delay being caused by the contractor was confirmed by the contractor. One question to the contractor: so why are you complaining about delay when you confirm that it is your own fault? Of course, you say that, oh, I told the architect, but he refused to do anything. Well, I understand this may happen, but you're going to have to at least write in to record the inaccuracy. You may not get a response, but at least if you write in to record the inaccuracy, it is on the evidence, it is on record. So the next one is money claims. Again, very often there's not enough detail. Like I said, you say you claim 100,000 a day for extended preliminaries due to an extension of time. Well, how does that work out? Loss expenses is actually about loss and expense that's incurred. It's not a pro rata of your prelims. You've heard all this from all the lawyers and consultants, so I'm not going to go into further detail with that. But again, you need to think about the detail. Don't lump them all together. List your claims with a cause and effect, link it back to the point of entitlement. And remember, you must have an auditable trail. Very often, people bung in things, but a classic example is that you have a handphone bill. And the handphone bill is in the name of, let's say, the project manager. It's not in the name of the claimant. So how then is that causation, that causal link, going to be established? And how is that going to pass internal audit? Slide, please. So I'll come back again to the fact that you say, I want to make a claim. Fine. I understand you want to make a claim. You need to make a claim. So you need to think about the facts, the factual element of it. Why, how, what is the impact? How do you show the connection? What is evidence that you have? Slide, please. This is just an illustration about cause and effect. Yeah, when you're claiming EOT, you're claiming it at the end. You're claiming it as an extension for the date of completion. So you really have to think about your concurrent delays and everything else and whether that there is a critical delay. Slide, please. Then you've got to think about the law. What's the legal basis, whether the procedural requirements have been complied with, and I know that you and your consultants will be dealing with that. Point I make here is actually just that. A good story on its own is not good enough. There are many good stories out there, but there are less good claims out there. Slide, please. Strategy. You've got to have a strategy, because if you're going to take me through the maze, you must have a roadmap. Your roadmap, that means to say you've got to have a strategy. Again, there's been talk about this already. The MTO, do you claim it as a way of you claim it under the grounds of suspension? Do you claim it under the grounds of force majeure? One thing also that I've seen quite a lot when it comes to, let's say, adjudication or arbitration is that one party may have been outmaneuvered. There was one particular adjudication, for example, whereby after the payment claim was sent in by the contractor, the developer actually went and terminated. It wasn't clear whether the termination was valid or invalid, but they terminated, on the face of it, they terminated, and they relied on clause 25.4 of PAM to delay payment until after the completion contractor had been brought in. Now that was being outmaneuvered because all of a sudden that claimant had a big hill to climb. So what are the common issues that come out of this? Claimants seek advice too late. A lot of people, their case is just a hit and miss as opposed to a roadmap with a good strategy. Slide, please. So just to close this off, claim anything you want, but remember, look at your entitlement, your causation, your evidence, your defenses. Take us through the maze, through the roadmap, and join the dots. Slide, please. You know, there are many sources of common problems, and we can talk about developers, consultants, main contractors, subcontractors. I think that in the interest of time, let's skip these. They are on the slides, and you can look at them yourself later. I don't need to be going through this. So can we have the next slide, please? Next slide, please. Next slide, please. Okay. One thing I will just say to you, and this is something that I often use when I give talks, is the time cost quality triangle. There is a mistake in my slide. After the word cost, there should be a slash. Remind yourself that whenever you are going for time and you put a cross nearer time, then it's going to, your quality is going to suffer, your cost is going to suffer. And wherever you put that little dot out that you choose, where you are going to be, if you're going to be cost conscious, then obviously your time is going to suffer, your quality is going to suffer. So it's a matter of fact that you can't have everything. Yeah? Slide, please. So what are the suggestions, some of the suggestions that I make? Slide, please. First of all, you have to have a benchmark. You must know what you're doing. You must know what is that benchmark, what is it that you should be achieving, so that you know whether you are overachieving or you're underachieving. And if you're underachieving, by how much, why, and can you do something about it? Right? So your benchmark here, I mean, your so-called gold standard would be to know and to follow your contract. I know with regards to work, people just refer to the specifications or the BQ. It's quite straightforward for you guys. But where it comes to claims and disputes, then really it comes down to contracts. So you have to look at it from a tender stage. You actually need to know what the provisions and assess your risk so that you can price it. At construction stage, you need to be looking at what are the requirements, your procedures, your notifications, your rebuttals. Don't forget your rebuttals. Somebody makes a claim against you, you've got to rebut. Don't just keep quiet. Huh? Somebody once said to me that, oh, because it was CC to me, I didn't do anything about it, I just put it into my bottom drawer and no action was taken. In the arbitration later on, it was asked, why did you not rebut? I rebutted now. Well, it's a bit late because people will look at it and think that you rebutted for the sake of rebutting because you're already in dispute. After CPC, of course, there's supposed to be diligent follow-up. How many people actually out there are still waiting for the final accounts? How many people out there have actually received the final certificates, have received the second moiety of retention sum? I mean, I talked about having lived through previous recessions, and one of the things that we found out was that in the case of recession, people have less work to do, people have less money, they start digging through their old projects to look for the second moiety retention sum that has not been released. And it's a lot. So these are the sort of things that we should be looking at and considering as what our benchmark is. Slide, please. I know that for a lot of people, you think that I'm just talking the same old, same old. I may be talking the same old, same old. I've been doing this and trying to pass this message and make this message known, heard, and understood, and actually implemented for, I don't know, 25 years. And there's still a lot of disputes around. You know, I make my living from disputes as a lawyer, as an arbitrator, as an adjudicator. And I don't know why we should be doing this and reinventing the wheel, but we are. So it means to say that this message must continue to be put out there. I know also that a lot of people say that it's very easy to talk, it's very difficult to implement on site. So I started looking at what are some of the minimum things that I think you should be considering. First of all, you need to at least know what your contract says, because if you don't know what your contract says, I mean, where is your starting point? You should actually be considering your site diary. You need to be having a program, because without a decent program, I think it's very difficult for you to show the cause and effect of an event of delay. And the notifications that are required by the contract. I mean, I used to say to people that, look, it may be that the lack of notification may not be fatal to your claim. However, when you are in a claim situation, you're in a dispute situation, you want to reduce the number of disputes. And procedural disputes are something that you can actually, is within your control, that you can reduce so that you can just focus on the main issue of entitlement and quantum. So I think that these are the minimum things that you need to do. Now, I again realize that for many contractors, you don't have in-house expertise for this, but we all know also that you can buy in expertise, you can use IT. And guys, WhatsApp doesn't qualify as an IT program to deal with this, okay? WhatsApp is a messaging tool. What you're looking at are actually so many other IT things out there that you can actually use. Don't ask me, I'm not an IT expert. All I can tell you is that I have seen things that work much better than our pen and paper and WhatsApp. So, next slide, please. So, when I grow up one day, when the industry grows up one day, when we're all big boys and girls, I think what we would like to see that we are actually doing on a daily basis is that, you know, we are looking at our pre-contract reviews, we're actually negotiating the contract and looking at it before we sign the contract. And where pre-contract review is concerned, leading up to signing, again, let me share with you one story that happened quite a number of years ago. So after the tender, there were some design changes and rationalizations to try and make something better, the design of this, in this case, it was a hospital. Long and short of it is that those design changes resulted in about 40 million ringgit worth of additional work, which the tenderer at that point hadn't signed up the contract yet. And they thought automatically it's plus 40 million, therefore their contract sum will be plus 40 million. But then when they signed the contract, that additional work of 40 million had been included in the contract as their scope of work at the original tender price. So because they weren't diligent enough in looking at what was happening prior to signing the contract, they got dumped with an additional 40 million ringgit worth of work, which they actually couldn't claim as a VO, although in their mind it was a VO. So these are the sort of disasters that can happen. Post-contract, in days to come, we're going to have a planner available. We're going to be using BIM. You're going to have what you call a letter writer, and you're going to have a database of documents. That's when we grow up, because it's not happening right now. Slide, please. And when we grow up also, we're going to be looking at case management that has got proper strategy, a proper roadmap, where the issues are all set out and broken down. Your evidence is there. There's going to be a good presentation of arguments, and you're going to manage the dispute resolution process. All these things that I mentioned are equally applicable, whether they be claims, counterclaims, or defenses. My point is, help me as an arbitrator or adjudicator to help you. Slide, please. So, ladies and gentlemen, these are hard-nosed claims by hard-nosed people. It's dollars and cents. It's not about fair, unfair. It's certainly not a fairy tale to get from your claim to the cash. So, in closing, the next slide, please. I wish you all the best, and thank you for listening to what sounds like a broken record, because I'm saying things again and again. Thank you.
Thank you, Swee. Thank you for your presentation. It is always enlightening to listen to you speak and sharing your thought. And I know I'm not alone, because there is another more than 460 audience with us today. It is a
Hi, everybody.
remarkable turnout. Banyak. See, I really like your background today. Is that a virtual background?
No, it's a real background. There's some Chinese screens that we bought.
Oh, could you tell us what exactly does it say?
Okay, I will tell you what it says. I will tell you what I was told it says, because unfortunately, I was English educated. I do not read Chinese characters. But I'm told that this one here, the first one here, it says country united. And the next one here says peace to the world. This one here, announcing peace. And the last one here, flowers bloom health. So
wow.
The reason why I chose this instead of the virtual background I had last time, because I thought that these sayings were particularly appropriate at this difficult time that we're facing.
It is quite an inspiring message indeed, Swee. Are you relating those messages to our current situation?
Yes, I am indeed. And this is a subliminal message that I'm trying to send out to our 460 people.
Yes, thank you. Okay, let's now start with our Q&A session.
Okay.
Swee, based on your personal experience, can you tell us why you think these common issues arise?
I think a lot of these common issues arise is because they are really, I mean, what we're talking about are legal considerations. You know, the guys who are doing the work, your supervisors, your construction managers and all that, they don't even realize that these legal considerations exist. They're not terribly aware of the contract beyond the construction drawings and the specifications. And even if people do know about it, for example, contract managers, they tend to know about it in general. Now, you had a speaker on your webinar series, a lady who said that she actually became more aware because she had to go and face it in an arbitration hearing, and that's how she learned about it hands-on. But she said before that, she was also not really fully aware of all the things. A lot of people see things as, is it something is fair or is it unfair? And fair or unfair based on their own eyes. So each contractor, each subcontractor, each developer, each consultant looks at fairness or unfairness based on their own benchmark. So the problem is that, of course, the law is not about fairness. It's about the contract you have entered into and you are held to it. So it's about upholding that allocation of risk that's in the contract. So I think that there's a disconnect between the people doing the work and making the claims and the actual requirements of the contract. So basically, I mean, you can't assume you are bound by the contract. So that's why I think this keeps happening.
Thank you, Swee. Swee, you see, we have been seeing these common issues on regular basis, and we also have been shouting, read the contract, see what the contract says, no assumption for a long time. But these common problems just keep reoccurring over and over again, like Groundhog Day.
Yes.
Do you think the repetitive occurrence of these common problems is due to the contractor not being able to understand the contract?
Yeah, I mean, I said before, when you asked me a question about mediation, and you said, what if people don't have expertise? I said, you can buy expertise. So if people are not willing to read the contract, understand the contract, you have to buy in the expertise. I can't tell you how many times over the course of my career as a lawyer, where I sometimes wonder how come I get paid to read a contract to somebody. It's like bedtime reading, I mean, it's somebody it's there, but people don't want to read it. They want to be read to. Now, I can understand that a lot of the language is perhaps complicated. And I know Nassim bangs on about plain language and that sort of thing. Yes, all that I understand. But yeah, people are not actually paying enough attention to the contract in the manner that the contract requires. I think that they think that they know the contract. They think that the contract says such and such. But when it comes down to a dispute, actually you realize it didn't. So I think that often happens. Why does it keep repeating? Well, I think a lot of people just do take the attitude, this is what I normally do. In fact, this is something that we hear a lot in terms of negotiations as well in terms of cross-examination. So, Mr. Tan, why did you do this? Oh, because we always do like this one. So that's often the situation, So how are we going to get out of this? Well, I don't know. You've got to tell me. I mean, the people on the ground have got to be the ones to do it because, like I said, 30 plus years, I'm still in disputes.
We are all still searching for the answer then. See, also during your presentation, you have given us some suggestions on how to avoid these common problems. Can I ask you to elaborate further for us on how these suggestions can be carried out on practical level?
Everybody's not going to like me very much to say the same old things. Read your contract firstly. But the other thing, like I said, is actually get the people who can do that type of work into your team and get them in early. So, everybody expects that the project manager is supposed to manage the project, yes. But he's also supposed to write letters to the employer. He's supposed to go to the authorities to get approvals. He's supposed to manage a subcontractor. He's supposed to deal with the consultants who want to have meetings every day. And he's supposed to deal with everything. He can't. Physically, number one, he can't. Secondly, he can't. One person cannot do everything. Nobody is Superman. Then, okay, you say, oh, contract, leave to the contract executive, the QS. You know for a fact that a lot of our QSs here are very, very good with numbers, very good with managing perhaps subcontractor claims, but they're not trained to write letters very well. I mean, that's their kind of the psyche, their brain is not there. So I think that what you have to do basically now is that you have got to work together in order to find a team that can deal with all these various requirements. Programming is another one of them. Construction contracts and disputes nowadays are actually quite sophisticated. It requires so many different aspects. In the old days, I shake hands with you, you do the job, I pay you, gao dim, finish, done. If there is a problem, I sit down with you, I talk about it, we come to a settlement because it's fair. You did work for me, fine, that's it, gone. But nowadays, I mean, you look at all the stuff that's going on in the construction project and the requirements that are being held, it's actually much more complicated. I will say, however, that as complicated as they may be, once you start doing things like BIM, and people are actually truly using it as a design program, with all the information is put into one area, that will help to some extent. So I actually subscribe to the idea of integrated teams. And I've mentioned this before. One of those last few big projects, big disputes that I did, we had an integrated team. In the conference room, we sat with the client, the claims consultant, the engineers, the QSs, the lawyers. And these are the sort of things, the collaboration we got to work with. So hopefully, I think that this is how we can deal with it. In the last webinar, I talked about communication. I talked about the spirit. I talked of the project. I talked about the ecosystem and the supply chain. If we can keep that cohesive, we can help deal with these things a lot better.
Okay, thank you. That's all from me. I'll pass the mic to Loon to continue now.
Thank you, Hongkit. Swee Im, I have some practical questions for you to answer though. You know, we don't talk about law, we don't talk about all the nitty-gritty about how to interpret a particular contract. We know that, you know, nowadays contracts have become more and more sophisticated.
Right.
Used to start with work just with a handshake and we trust each other and completed the job without much problems or disputes. But nowadays, we still shake hands, but with a big bundle of documents or perhaps a few bundle of contract documents with us and signing at the last page. I sometimes doubt whether they have actually read the contract and understood the contract properly before they actually put their signature on those documents, even from the perspective of a lawyer. But, you know, everyone says that we need to know what the contract is. We must know what we are entering into. And you also said that...
Sorry to interrupt you, I am having my eyes swam.
Sure, no problem. And you know that you also said that the contractor or developer, whoever signing the contract, should at times import expertise from outside. But cost would be an issue, isn't it? Yeah? It's expensive even at that stage to spend money, you know, on lawyers and consultants before we put our signature on those documents.
Well, there are many ways of looking at value. Okay, Wai Loon, I mean, somebody may say, Wai Loon, your fees are very expensive. But let's say you were to charge 20,000 ringgit to go and review a contract. And because you reviewed the contract and because there was a discussion with the client about certain risks that were highlighted, and it was managed or negotiated out as the case may be, and that results in a saving of, let's say, 2 million. Does that become expensive? It doesn't. So, I mean, these are the sort of things that people don't want to consider. And I mean, I've been doing that for years. And certainly in my earlier days as a lawyer, you see to tell people, I say, but it's so logical, but nobody wants to see logic. So I think that when we talk about expensive, what is expensive? It's value. I think that's something that we've got to deal with. And the same for consultants. You know, at the end of the day, what do they say? Pay peanuts, you get monkeys, right? But the other element also where cost is concerned is that we've got to think about this. It's cheaper to get something done upfront when there's no absolute demand. But people don't do that, so they rely on my dato is bigger than your dato kind of thing. But as we all know, relationships break down when it comes to dollars and cents. And then right at the end, there's a problem, there's a panic, and then they come looking for you. Well, Loon, I bet you your fees are more expensive at that time.
Certainly. Yeah,
yes.
I think people, are actually not willing to put monies on risk management, but to resolve disputes. And
I mean, somebody said to me, one consultant said to me, when the house is on fire, the bucket of water becomes more expensive.
That's right. Yeah, I mean, look at it from another perspective. You know, I have clients that they came to me and said that, even what's the point if I hire lawyers and consultants even at the stage of the execution of the contract? Because at the end of the day, you know, we are contractors. It's either you get the job or you don't get the job. If you get a job, you just sign your on the documents and you move on. You know, we manage it as it comes along. Yeah, if you try to negotiate, you don't even get the job. What do you think about this kind of things, right? It's useless to hire lawyers at that stage because it's either you get a job, you don't get a job, and that's it.
Well, okay, this is where I come from. Okay, for me, I agree. It's very difficult if you don't sign up, you don't get a job. You don't get a job, there's nothing to talk about. But is it really worth it when you get a job and you don't manage your risk? And then you get into a lot of trouble because in that situation, I think probably it's cheaper to go and play golf, right? Than to actually go and get the job, but tungkos lumos do the job and then you lose lots more money than not working. So it's kind of like this. If you want to stay in this game, you got no choice. Those are the rules. You just got to play by the rules. I mean, you don't go and play football with a tennis racket, for example, right?
Mm-hmm.
Of course, there is the alternative. In the mid-1990s, when Hong Kong International Airport was being built, there was one particular program for some of the construction, and contracts were very, very onerous. All the tenderers, all the big boys actually ganged up together and boycotted tendering altogether. So they put pressure on the Hong Kong authorities such that the contract was actually changed. This hasn't happened in Malaysia. There's always one idiot there who will sign buta. And so, we are in an industry whereby that is the game. So what can you do? The best you can do is actually manage your risk as best as you can. And in terms of managing your risk, and we were talking just now about how much does it cost, I would say, Wailun, if the client were to pay you or your lawyers, let's say 3,000 ringgit, 5,000 ringgit a month, and you just give them, let's say, half a day of your time per month, you can actually help improve their documentation, their risk management much better if they spend 5,000 ringgit and get a junior QS or even a mid-level QS full-time. So again, that's what I'm talking about, it's about value, and you got no choice, right? You can commit suicide or you can make the best of it.
That's very true. Sometimes I also see a lot of cases where because of a technical management issue, not the site issues, because it was not properly managed at the contract administration office-wise, they lose their entitlement to EOT. And per day of LED, the exposure was about 40,000 a day. Now you're talking about 5,000 ringgit for a QS, that would be wiped out, the entire year of that guy's salary by just 2 or 3 days of delay.
Absolutely.
Now, when it comes to management of a project, Swee, I've also heard a lot of from a client saying that, no choice lah, these employers and the consultants are just too tough. You have to listen to them. Otherwise, they will give us a lot of difficulties, So we need to go on with the work without much trouble. So I just need to comply with whatever they say as much as I can. What do you think about this kind of attitude, Swee?
Well, first of all, I don't think the attitude is correct. I mean, in the sense that the consultants shouldn't be bullying, the consultants shouldn't actually be acting so-called unprofessionally. Now, I know that we had Pride and Prejudice some weeks ago, and I know that the QS, the senior architect, and the senior engineer all basically says that, oh, this thing may happen, but it's only very seldom. I don't think so. I think that actually on the ground people, a lot of this kind of inverted commas bullying is prevalent. Now, a couple of things I'll say. The first one is that a lot of times these fellas who are consultants and asking for certain things, they themselves may not be aware of the contract. They themselves may not be aware that when they give an instruction to change certain things, such as, for example, the method of working, that it actually can amount to a VO. And then when you make a claim, it looks bad on them, they get upset. So, I mean, I think that this is about understanding what the contract does provide for, what it does not provide for. And even if you have to do it, and I understand, I mean, this happens on site, then I think that you have got very little choice but to write politely back and confirm a particular instruction. I mean, you take PAM, for example, even that standard form contract, which is so-called biased in favor of the developer, that one has got a provision for confirmation of architect instruction, CAI. So use it. Earlier on I was talking about the site meeting minutes. When you disagree with something, just write in. I know that you will face some resistance. In fact, many years ago, we were negotiating a contract on behalf of a contractor, and actually your ex-firm was acting for the employer. So,
okay.
As usual okay. Screen came in there, very kiasu, got to have all these very onerous conditions. So my client said, okay never mind we just go with it. So a lot of notification requirements. So finally the contract signed, everybody very happy. First event occurred. my client then sent a notification in, and the developer and said, "Hey, why you send me this notification? Why you send so many letters? Just started the project already. You're starting to issue letters already." So my client came to me and said, "What do I do?" I said, "You have to go back to tell them, said, this is your contract, what? Your lawyers wanted all these requirements in. So if I don't comply the requirements, I'm in breach of contract. I comply the requirements, you scold me. What am I going to do? The least I can do is comply with the requirements that you asked me to do." So you don't have to be emotional about it, but you can actually just write factually what is required and leave it there on the record.
I think I can't agree more with you, Swee Im, about that. You see, Swee Im, do you actually feel that, as time goes by, especially the past 5 or 7 years, right? You look at the contracts that we have in the market, especially for those big infrastructure works that are ongoing in Malaysia. There are already multiple layers of procedure when it comes to claims, when it comes to applications. It has become a norm that the contract has become so complicated that you have to hire so many people just to attend to the admin part of the works and not the actual works on site. Do you agree with this development? And do you think that it's actually healthy going forward?
I think that it's not healthy going forward because it's actually detracting from the real reason for construction, which is to build things, not to fight. We're supposed to be building. Now, these things come from a variety of sources. I remember quite a number of years ago, we were drafting contracts for one of the major infrastructure projects here. And we actually advised clients about what actually is workable and fair in that sense. When I say fair, I don't mean to say that something that you like or I like particularly, but just that there is a balance of risk. But the client says, no, it's got to be this way. And we know for a fact that the more unfair the contract is, the more likely you are going to be you'll be bitten by it. It will come back and bite you. Now, the difference, of course, is that when you have an unfair contract, but you got a fair client. And I said to you previously in the previous seminar and webinar that, there have been many projects which are major and we have been completed well and we're using it until today, but which did not have any major arbitrations on them. And to be fair, I think MRT, line 1, where the main contractor was concerned, there was quite a lot of that. There were a lot of settlements. So it's still possible, but the point is that everybody's got to play their part. And being kiasu, I don't think is necessarily playing your part. When I started as a young lawyer and I was drafting a contract, I mean, a number of stupid things that I used to ask for, which was so unreasonable. I look at it nowadays in hindsight, and I'm like, oh my God, I'm so ashamed. How could I even ask for that? So these are the things that we've got to learn moving forward. But it seems to me that actually we are not learning, we're unlearning, we're going backwards.
That's pretty true. Perhaps, especially in the younger days as a lawyer, right, we don't look at the practical issues
Correct.
more clearly.
Correct.
You contribute, you feel like you need to put more things, and more things means better things, right? Yeah, that was actually the perception of a young lawyer. Yes. But as you grow older, you more see things clearer. Actually, you can get rid of all those unnecessary procedure and get right to the bottom of things.
I agree.
Now, when it comes to management, Swee Im, I really want to ask you about this. There has been a question, I think, from Nick. I can actually twist it a bit. I think his idea is this. Now, we are talking about keeping a comprehensive records, but sometimes I backfire. You want to leave things, in a little bit not clear, so that there will be rooms for you to play with later. Like, for example, every application of extension of time that comes from a contractor, they'll always claim for the gross EOT without giving so much details whenever there is an event happening. Now, do you think that this kind of a practice is actually good? Meaning to say that sometimes less information means better for the contractor.
If we talked about changing attitudes, right? And I talked about a changing attitude from when I was acting as a lawyer for any one party and passionately trying desperately to eke a case out of nothing for a client. And the sort of things that you think of and how you deal with things. Now, I compare that now to myself sitting as a dispassionate third-party neutral. And my attitudes are very, very different. I now actually look at those types of so kiasuism, that kind of so-called tactics, that kind of emotion as being, frankly speaking, a slight waste of time. Because if you want a dispute or a matter or a claim to be resolved, at the end of the day, you just got to come down to the basics as to what the issue is and what the evidence is, what the law is, and therefore what the solution is. All this that you're talking about is actually posturing and it's actually noise. It's just peripheral noise. Now, I understand, don't get me wrong, this is easier said than done. I think that if I'm still out there acting as a lawyer or a claims consultant, acting for one party, I'll still be fighting like mad and I'll still be using all sorts of tactics. I understand that. But all I'm just saying to you is that when it comes down to the crux of it, you're only looking at that part, not all that.
All right. Thank you, Swee Im. It's already, what is it, 11:56. We have gone on for an hour, And,
sorry about that.
No, it's not. Sorry, I think the topic is just too interesting. I even have so many more questions to ask, but the time doesn't permit. And luckily, more than 400 audiences still with us, from the beginning until the end. It shows a lot. And,
to all of you with your patience.
It have been fantastic, and thanks for sharing your views with us for an hour, even though you only sign up for 30 minutes.
Yeah.
Thanks so much. Do you have any concluding remarks for the audience?
Yeah, the concluding remarks basically is that, if you're in this game, you got to play by the rules, and the rules are the contract. You play football, you look for Ronaldo. You don't go and look for Roger Federer. Okay, so if you're not so good at it, then you have to train up, you've got to get your good coaches, you've got to buy in good players. But it is the game. I mean, I think you can't imagine or you can't expect to be in a game of football and then winning the Wimbledon tennis. It just doesn't happen. So like it or don't like it, fair or not fair, difficult or not difficult, if you're in the game, you either stay in it or you have to get out. You have no choice. So when you stay in it, you just have got to manage it as best as you can, put your best effort there, rather than, as I said, hope for a fairy tale. So on that note, enough of lecturing everybody, and good luck. I hope the MCO is lifted. I hope we're all going back to work. I hope we're all thinking about the stuff that we talked about the last webinar, not this webinar.
Thank you, Swee. It's our pleasure to host you for the second time here. Your message is clear. I'm sure the audience has again enjoyed and benefited from today's section.
Thank you very much,
Thank
guys.
you. So our topic for tomorrow is related to tax matters. In light of the economic impact of COVID-19 and MCO, the Inland Revenue Board and Royal Malaysian Customs have since made some announcements in respect of managing our tax affairs. So we will have two guests who are expert in this area, Mr. Harold Tan from Harold and Lam Partnership and Mr. Lee Fok Cheong from SC Lee and Associates to join us tomorrow morning. Well, that's the end of today's session. Thank you for tuning in. Stay positive and stay safe. Enjoy the rest of your day. Goodbye, everyone. Thank you, Swee. Thank you, Loon.
Thank you, everybody.